The two Jills, a psychologist and psychic intuitive, reveal mind-blowing insights that turn psychology, self-help, and conscious teachings on their heads. Why? Because they work. Real help, sincere growth is here. Welcome to Psyched.
Hey, Jill.
Hi, Jill.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I actually feel like I'm on the mend, so we'll see. Fingers crossed on that one. I feel like I'm getting out of the woods. All right. So today, the thing that's been in my orbit is helping people through transition. And what I'm finding, I found it a few times this week with different people, clients and others, that transition is misunderstood. And when we leave it to the brain doesn't like it. And so we don't value transition for what it is, and the brain tries to shut it down as quickly as possible. And as a result, I think this would be a good conversation, for you and I to noodle the benefits of it, give some strategies as to how to navigate it, help people understand what the brain is doing when we find ourselves in transition, and to really, I'm going to say, have a different and maybe for some radical approach, radical new approach to transition.
This is such an exciting topic because it is a theme that comes across regularly in my client work. There are so many people that are wanting to make a transition, or they're maybe forced into transition, and they're not accessing their joy in it. They're not accessing a positive sense of excitement about how great this change may be, even if it wasn't their idea. So I'm delighted that we're talking about this today, Jill.
I think that's perfect. And I think that's a great place to start, because transition happens sometimes when we want it to, even though we still don't like it, but we plan for it. Other times it comes upon us. And I think even at those times, it's important to have a mindset that serves you. And so if you do find yourself, for me personally, when I find myself in a transition that I didn't consciously choose, I give myself the space to say I was probably hanging on too long to wherever I was. I probably wouldn't have moved to the next. It's like the lobster outgrowing its shell. And it's like, it's good, even though it's too tight. So I probably wouldn't have moved had I not been thrust into a transition. And so even in those cases where you didn't choose it, you could still prime your mindset to openness, curiosity, let's see what's here for me, rather than go into grievance as we speak and resist, and just really resist putting your toe in the water. You're hanging over the water. You might as well put your toe in it, right? So that's just a good place to start if you're in a transition and you don't think you chose it.
Beautiful. Jill, when you were saying that leaving yourself some room or some space in your thought space, I find that so important. For some that are visual, just a simple statement of "this might be great" is enough to do that. It doesn't take much to loosen up some of the anxiety, the overwhelming uncertainty about it that can just preoccupy our brain. So I do feel like it's our opportunity, and I would say obligation in a way, to add that space through really tangible things. And that what I just mentioned is a super simple one. And maybe it's something somebody writes on their hand, or they have a little sticky in all their kind of go-to places, on their computer, or they could do something as a wallpaper on their phone. This might be great because it's true. This might be great.
And the brain isn't looking for truths, right? And so I like what you're saying, because I use and everybody knows this by now, I use their infinite possibilities in every moment. Why am I just choosing one bad one? And I think when you're talking about creating space, what we're doing is trying to clean out the brain, because the brain was driving on a track that was filled with our made up version of expectations and false certainty. And I knew where I was going, and then I got derailed. So there's the sense that you're giving up what you thought was going to be. What the brain we're giving up what we thought we knew our direction was, or what we thought we knew tomorrow would look like. So we're basically giving up, oddly, a fantasy in that space. And this is about really being honest with ourselves here. We are giving up a fantasy that we've created, and that throws the brain into a little bit of a tizzy. The brain likes its fantasies, it expects its fantasies, and it doesn't do well when its fantasies. It tries everything it can do to maintain the direction and the parameters of that fantasy.
There's a lot I want to say there. One thing I want to unpack a little bit, Jill, you mentioned earlier, the brain isn't looking for truth. Do you feel like the brain is looking for whatever it's sort of convinced of? How would you describe that? Because I know that my brain can be altered in a positive way by logic, which maybe isn't the same as truth, but I know, and especially maybe it is my client base that is kind of drawn to my work. They're looking for logic-based theories and hypotheses, because the brain can go, oh yeah, that's true. You know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know, I'm curious about what you think about that.
I like that. To clarify, I think we have to set our brain to look for truth, or it remains in its fantasy state. So we are actually looking for truth. We're not aware that our brain isn't trained in that direction.
Okay.
When brain gives us certainty, it's not certainty. That's a truth, right? So it's nuanced, but I think that describes it, if that makes sense. We want truth.
So much. Yeah. Yep. And I do like this idea that the brain is sticky on things it's currently convinced of, but it can be persuaded through other ideas, something as simple as this could be great, right? It may unstick itself from a loop, from a self-defeating, self-sabotaging pattern by very simple things. I love your word fantasy. And for some people that may not resonate as much with that word, do you feel like this important concept that you're bringing up, a fantasy, do you feel like it's the same of unfulfilled dreams or unfulfilled promises? Are you using fantasy in that same, do you feel like those are interchangeable here?
I think when I say fantasy, it is the promises you've told yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then it gets upset when they are unfulfilled. So yes, I agree with all of those words.
Okay.
It sees it has developed an idea, and it is sticky is a great word. It is stuck on that, and it believes it's real and true and is supposed to happen.
So it has a hard time transitioning because it doesn't want to give up. So I love the word fantasy for somebody that is sort of like, well, I'm not living in a fantasy. But if you're resisting transition, you might be. You might have been living within a fantasy sort of bubble, and then it turns out, oh, that didn't go the way you thought, or somehow change has been thrust upon you, transition is on your doorstep, And it could be this bubble that you're sort of like, but I don't want to let go. That's actually holding you back from making a new reality great.
Exactly. So what happens initially for many people, frankly, whether they're thrust in it or they choose it, is that there are pockets of resistance. If you're thrust into it, the resistance is almost immediate. If you are choosing it, the resistance comes in the form of a very tentative, almost doubting perspective. Should I? Is this right? So there's always this pull backwards, to what's comfortable, albeit uncomfortable. Familiar, let's say, rather than comfortable. And so it doesn't really matter. Resistance is a big part of transition. And I think you and I can help people. I mean, even what we're saying, just to make that space and allow, will help you just be like, oh, to say, I'm in resistance right now. I understand what's happening. Something new is afoot. Something new that I did not predict, fantasize about, or expect is now happening. So the brain's anxiety is really, if you think about it, maybe letting go of the fantasy, but it's afraid of new. New has an equal sign to this could be bad, unsafe, uncharted territory. And it creates a resistance profile to that, program to that. And we feel it, but we're resisting new.
Yeah. The uncertainty that can cause freezing and lack of action. We were talking about action in another episode, and movement and that sort of thing. I feel like watching out for that in ourselves and in others is so important. And there was actually an Instagram post I provided recently, and it was something to the effect of the part of your brain that's freaked out about not knowing, how things are going to go, also didn't know how your current enjoyable things in your life were going to go.
I like that.
And yet you got there, right? So this over-reliance on, I know my brain, and I know from my community, there's a strong sense of, well, the brain success is dependent upon the brain knowing all the steps to get through something. But I completely disagree. The brain can have maybe a rough set of plans, like a whiteboard set of plans, and okay, I'll do this, and then I'll do that, and then this will happen. But what's really propelling you is a deeper sense of self that's beyond your brain, right? That knows you can get through anything.
Because you always have.
You got to this point with a whole bunch of uncertainty, right? And even if somebody doesn't like everything about their life, there's probably something in your life that you're proud of you in that moment, that you're resilient, that you are you're joyful, you're inspiring, you're optimistic. Hang on to those values in yourself because you need them now in transition more than ever.
Yes. And you've always been in transition. But for the fantasies that things have landed, crystallized, arrived, have a path or a plan that seems prescribed. In reality, we are always in transition. Every moment is always new. We have navigated through uncertainty, which is the only moment we've ever had, because every moment is uncertain, right? So the brain is somehow making us feel like we're bad at this, when in fact, we are living this every moment of every day. It is a weird delusion to not honor the fact that we are always uncertain. It kind of blows my mind, right? That we've created this weird fantasy of
That's interesting. Jill, you froze for a second.
Are you there?
Yeah, it froze. Do you know anything on your side that might be causing the freeze?
No.
Okay. Let me close down some things. Let's both do that because I want to hear exactly what you were just saying. And then I need to text Jeff because there's new ducklings in the backyard. So we need to make sure the cat's doesn't have access. Duckling rescue going on here.
I'm not on my strongest internet, I'm noticing, but if I switch it, I'll probably lose you. This will kill off.
We'll just call back in if that happens. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to try and switch this because my stronger one is where I want to be anyway.
Okay.
Right, if I lose you, I'll.
Okay. Hey, Jeff, there are new mallard ducklings in the backyard. Just wanted you to be aware in terms of Smokey.
That's so cute, little ducklings.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm good. I switched to my better internet, so
Awesome. Okay, very good. So do you remember where you were? I hope so.
I was kind of saying how
the brain that it defies logic, go ahead with that part because it is surprising.
Because we are logical people, but we're not seeing what we do every day with open eyes. We're not seeing it logically, and we're seeing the brain's interpretation of something. It's like, you're okay because you're certain. That's not why we're okay. That's the brain using itself to create a certainty that actually doesn't exist. It's a non-reality. And we don't need to live there. We can embrace the fact that we've got this. We've always had this.
It's beautiful. And I want to amplify what you're saying in terms of the transition part. We're always in transition. And that should make us, it can help us feel more confident and more capable when we are in a state of transition that may feel more significant and terrifying.
Yes. And that's a good point. We don't want to take away from the fact that some transitions upend your life. Okay. It is a hard reset on everything, right? That's one of those, when everything starts falling apart, maybe things are really falling into place, right? So there are those huge global transitions. Then there are the transitions to college. We have stopped allowing for transition on two levels. The first level is we think we should be okay right away. Our kids call from college the second day and they're like, I'm not okay. I gotta transfer. Right. So there's this weird expectation that we're setting up, the brain is setting up, society is setting up, that an okay person is okay immediately in a new situation, a new environment, a new job, and whatever. I remember when my kids were little, I had people come to help me. You know, they were au pairs from other countries. And I made a pact with all of them that they wouldn't do any evaluating of the situation for a month. No, I made a mistake. I shouldn't be here. I'm not sure I like this family. I'm not sure I like where I live. What have I done? To just keep that off of the table for a month, because you're not in a position to be evaluating anything. Transition is not, I'm going to hit the ground evaluating everything that happens every step of the way. Transition is an open space. And the longer you keep it open, the more online you are, the more curious, the more you're able to observe, the more you're able to really, I hate the word be present, but relax into it and work with it like you chose it. Right?
Great advice. Because it does take that amount of time. One perspective that may be new for some people is this idea, and I feel like it's a really big idea. It's been a big idea in my life. You're creating a new you with every big transition. You haven't made that you yet. My brain goes, whoa, You know what I mean? So even biologically, people that know biology a lot better than I do are like, yeah, you're recreating yourself on a cellular level. You're almost like a new you every X number of days or X number of hours. So there's that side of it. But then there's also just the psychology, the energy patterns, the flow, the rhythm. You create that over time in every big transition in your life. You need time and patience and self-love and compassion and grace to do that as well as possible. So to be hard on yourself it's like when somebody starts running. I still have never started running. I'm not a runner, and I probably never will be a runner, right? But when somebody first started running, they probably weren't great at it. They made themselves into the person that is a runner. This is everything in our lives that is big and notable is like that. Relationships, careers, health, well-being, inner peace, all of these things are big transitions, and they're worthy of, like you said, at least a 30-day, I don't even want to say trial period. Let's call it a transition period.
Yeah. I mean, at least 30 days, but I would offer, don't stop being in transition. This is the new radical view that I think we can offer people is transition is the sweet spot. Being locked down in your brain's fantasy of what the next 5 years, 10 years is going to look like, that's not living. So I would say living is being in transition. The energy of that is a being in the flow energy. And it's not directed. It's not amorphous. It's just open to a lot more of what's available to us in life on a daily basis. Once you develop an idea about something and you go for it, you've heard of a one-track mind. That's a one-track life. And there's a trade-off. Is that kind of safety net that you may think you require worth the limitation that it places on you? It is dulling. I don't care what you say. It is dulling. Maybe not immediately, but definitely over time. And my husband and I laugh, and I brought this up before, is that he looks at his journal, and he's been doing it for years and years and years, and it is cyclical to a day. We would see friends once a year, and we would be eating dinner with them in the same place the year later, having no idea that it was on the same, like we didn't know. We're just going through our lives, but there's an incredible amount of cyclical stuff going on here. If you're not paying attention and trying to get off those cyclical patterns and transition, and not that they're all bad. We like those people. We see them once a year. That's the way it works out, right? So that's not what I'm talking about here, but, staying in a job year after year because it's comfortable, dealing with the same frustrations over and over again. Yes, you know how to deal with them, but did you ever think there's a world where you don't have to? And we don't give ourselves that opportunity. It's crazy.
Denying ourselves those opportunities is so important to think about too. And even if somebody has been or knows themselves as limiting themselves, and I talk myself, I overthink things, that doesn't have to be the way you are for the rest of your life. Again, we just maybe haven't given ourselves that room for exciting transitions that we could be making in our life. They might be big, they might be small. You can start small if you want to, with little behavioral or pattern changes throughout your day, doing one thing and instead of the other order. They could be small, they could be big. It's really up to you. For some that are more, let's say, excitable about life, I'm definitely one of these people. I notice that when I'm excited about a transition, I can almost have these noticeable cycles of, it's not like manic. I hope. No, I would be diagnosed and I'm not. And that's not what's happening. But I can be very excitable about things. And my brain can be really, really charged up for these grand plans of, oh, I'll do this and I could do that. And oh my God, wouldn't that be great? And sometimes when I act in that moment, I actually get the best results because it's not ungrounded. It's not illogical. It's just excited. But if I don't act in that moment and I try to get something going or off the ground, in the other cycle that I have of what I would call overthinking it, why I can't believe I was even thinking about that. What a ridiculous idea. That'll never work, right? If I try to act in that phase, it's very uninspired. It's very small-minded in a way. It's not big idea, Jill. It's, I guess we could try kind of version of Jill. And that's not my best Jill. That Jill is less attracting, right, of other people that are wanted to say yes to something that I'm putting together, or offering, or being, or whatever. It's almost a magnetism in a way. So for anyone that relates into that in themselves, if you're not giving yourself permission to take more action and do more movement in the excitable phase of you, I feel like you're missing out on a huge part of your sacred energy and your creator side of you.
I agree with that 100%. And you and I don't talk about manifestation because it has gotten, I don't know what's happened to it, but there is energy in this world. And when you're on a higher energy, things happen. And when you're on a lower energy, different things happen. And so there is that, to me, is the quality of manifestation. It's like what you bring to it does matter energetically. You don't get, positive things coming from negative energy. And it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in physics, and it just doesn't work that way in life. So I do think that speaks to the core of what we're trying to say. When you find yourself in transition, whether you chose it or you didn't, choose it. Because the energy is what's paramount in helping you either weather the storm or get to a new place that you've never been before, and get to a new place that you've never been before. But your energy says everything. And so people do come to me a lot of times, I will say, with logic. Well, Jill, I didn't choose this, and this isn't a good situation. I say with love, I know, and I don't care, because we're here now. And this isn't even just problem solver Jill, because I need to fix everything. This is like your energy at this point matters. So being a victim to circumstance is going to keep you a victim to circumstance. I need you out of that toilet, and I need you thinking on okay, I didn't choose this, but I'm going to choose it. I'm going to make it my bitch, and I'm going to move on, because energetically we have to. I don't know what you think about that. It's kind of
no, I love
brazen.
It. You and I have our own personalities and how we do this. But I'm very convinced, Jill, that the friends that are going to you in that moment, you're telling them exactly what they counted on you to say to them because they needed that reminder, right? And some transitions can be terrifying. A breadwinner in a household losing their job it takes some effort there amidst the, what are we going to do, to this could be great, right? And that's why we're doing this episode, because we totally appreciate that it can be hard. An unexpected death of somebody, that's just, it can be devastating. There are versions of transition that a big part of us says, I don't want to find anything good in this because it hurts and it sucks so bad. So we're really wanting to speak to your heart, the part of you that I feel is whispering to you that's saying, okay, maybe it's not going to be great, but you're going to be okay. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's that form of transition. And I love that we're addressing all sides of this. So yes, it might be great, or at a minimum, you're going to be okay. Right?
Yes. And I do want to say, when I'm, grief is a different,
it's a different thing,
story, right?
but
So
I'm sorry. I know part of you was like, Joe, why did you even bring that up?
no, it's important.
Yeah.
No, it's 100% important. And I am not compassionate, but even recently I had a client, and they just really were so stressed out. It went from a panic attack that never ended. It was a permanent panic attack, and it ended up being a serious crisis. So obviously this person can't go to work now. You're in a crisis. The psychiatric care has to get on board. I mean, this is a place this person never thought that they would find themselves, right? So in that moment, I'm not going to start getting upset about the fact that this person can't work. I'm not going to start getting upset just about the material aspects of what's going on here, right? Those are the kind of situations where I'm like, there will be grief, and there will be processing of that, and there will be loss, and there will be healing, right? But at this moment, I need you on board. I need you with me, right? So it's that kind of, there'll be time for all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you've brought up these really important mental health aspects of this. So thank you for that.
Crisis is crisis, but
crisis is crisis. Yeah.
But I'm sorry to cut you off, but just to drive the point home, when you're in crisis, the only thing to do is get out of the crisis. Any change, anything that's going to happen is going to happen after. So if your transition is beginning with a crisis, that is a scramble to ready the ship. Then once the ship is steady, then we start talking about what you and I are talking about. But crisis gets addressed first to get back to some kind of functional baseline where you can get yourself back on board and allow for you to then appreciate and be in the transition. So I think that part is very important. But even weathering a crisis, you have to find the part of that of you that's still there, right? And not overwhelmed with grief, and not overwhelmed. The bus is burning. You need to get out of the bus. You need to find that person who can run out of the bus.
It's important. I was just reflecting as you were saying that some cultures are better at helping access that resilience within themselves. I did a client trip to the Yucatan where the Mayans were, that tradition is still there. And this, our guide, who's trained in Mayan history and Mayan ancestry and culture and traditions and all those things, was mentioning that the jaguar, what is the name for the jaguar? I'm going to forget it. I have already forgotten it. No, Balam. Thank you. The inner jaguar, the Mayan word is Balam. And in that culture, the Mayan culture, they were all taught through oral tradition that everyone has an inner jaguar, that everyone has that inner ability to fight, not just flight, and to be present within yourself, right? So I feel like anyone can adopt a new tradition at any time. And whether it's transition or crisis, just that there's a part of you that might know that, okay, this is going to be hard, but I've got this. Or depending on the situation, this could be great. I've got this, right? And we all have access to that. And that might be a new idea for somebody. The other part I love to address, and you teed it up really beautifully, Jill, is that sometimes we are leading through a transition on behalf of others. Whether it's you as a parent or even you as an adult child, you're assisting someone else in addition to experiencing and co-creating the transition. And that ability for you to find fake or create positivity in some way, or just hopefulness is another word that might work there of, we're going to get through this. I know this is hard, but we're going to get through this. And a classic example of this is a parent that's experiencing divorce, especially where there's children involved. That ability to say, this is hard, I know this may not be what you want, but we're going to get through this, right? Is such a lead by example. It plants a platform of optimism and hopefulness that might not only help them through that transition, but through their lives, right? I have adult family and adult friends that still feel traumatized by a divorce that happened sometimes 40 years ago. And it's so much a part of their identity. And it does make me wonder if, had they been offered a different storyline, right, that it could be that they're like, yes, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old. And then I didn't have the arguing. There was no arguing I didn't have to go to sleep with arguing or tension or stress, because this parent got to be themselves in that environment. And this parent got to be themselves in that environment. And there was actually some benefits to that, because I had, yes, there's a lot of inconveniences and a lot of downside, but there was some upside too, right? This opportunity for us to tell our own story and have it be a good story amidst transition is really, really helpful. So even somebody that maybe has lost their job or is in this terrifying position of starting a new business venture, watch your stories, let yourself be excited and let yourself author. You're authoring a story of, I'm excited to try this and I'm going to see how it goes.
I love that. And look, history can be rewritten. If you look at the word itself, his story, it's a story. And we have to stop looking at history as fact. It is an interpretation of events. That is all. And that interpretation, which the brain is a master at, can interpret to help you climb up the stairs or sink you into the basement. So that story is paramount. And one of the things that I do along the same lines that you're saying, especially with divorce, I work with a lot of people who are divorcing. That was a real niche for me for a while. But the notion is, because the brain interprets events themselves are neutral. Our interpretation of those events decides whether they're good for us or whether they're bad for us. So one of the things that I like to do when people are really struggling with an event, a transition, is we set it to neutral, because sometimes you can't get to positive, and sometimes positive feels a little disingenuous at the time. It's just too far a leap from where you are. So if we can at least neutralize the field by saying divorce isn't good, divorce isn't bad, it's neither. Now let me see what I want to bring to it. And then you talk about very nicely, like, well, there are interpretations there that, if grievance wasn't blocking miracles, I would have seen that there were real benefits. But when I tell a child whose parents are going through divorce that this is neutral, you're in transition, I want you to keep your eyes open for what's working. I want you to notice what's better for yourself. There is often so much guilt in that space that people can't even look at what's going on that's good. So, and it's because we have so much cultural, societal, familial, generational ideas that are clouding our experience. And we're not able to think for ourselves. That story is getting in the way. That history is getting in the way. So this neutralizing, I say, set everything to neutral. When somebody comes to me with a big problem, I got fired from my job, that's neutral. And then, of course, you're in transition. So there are those two pieces there. But starting transition from a neutral perspective is much better than starting it behind the 8-ball.
Energetically, what you just described to me, I've looked at it like the size of a ball. Like our energy field is this sphere. It's a spherical ball shape. And when you said you can't even see it, that's when your sense of self is so small that you can't see everything. And it's a very limited state of operation for any human to be operating in such a small energy field that it can't even see what's going on, and let alone the bigger opportunities and the bigger sense of, okay, how are we going to make this okay? Or in a great situation, how are we going to make this great, right? So the bigger our energy field, the more we see opportunities, downsides, upsides, potential, greatness, glory, grace, all of those things. And for me, the best way to do that is to literally notice. It's like observing, I feel so small right now. I can't even see, right? And then it's almost like taking a couple deep breaths. It expands your energy field again, and you start to feel more alive again, because the smaller your energy field, the more limited, the more small, the more hopeless, and the more non-creative and unpowerful you're going to feel about who and what you are. And in transition, you want to feel as aware, as open, as visible and visioning as possible for your gain and everybody's gain. It's a win-win situation when we're allowing ourselves to feel big and present and aware no matter what's going on. And I would say especially in transition. And that's not a pattern a lot of people have, but they can definitely create it.
You can create it. And I would say when you're feeling that small ball, what I like to say is you're stuck in your brain. And you know how big your brain is. It's not that big. So if you could just be like, I'm stuck in here, in this little portion of my head, that is literally where you are stuck.
Yeah.
And so we do have to start looking outward and stop this sort of inward. It's almost like an implosion that happens. And we're trying to reverse that tendency to implode, to keep drilling down smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. The brain likes to just have two options, infinite possibilities. It's not its jam, right? It's not good at that. It doesn't do that. We navigate the infinite possibilities and we let the brain do what it's going to do, but we have to be very thoughtful and discerning about its limitations. We have to be knowledgeable about its limitations. Even this identity, the brain doesn't, you've said this so many times, Jill, just asking the question, we ask the brain who we are. We ask the brain what God is. We ask the brain, where did we come from? We're asking the brain unanswerable questions pretty much all day long. And it's not just the big ones. Even asking the brain, what should I do? The choice is ours. The brain is more, I like to look at it. It's a fabulous organ. I'm not minimizing it. It keeps us running and it's fantastic. But for a while, it's better to disengage with it and look at it just as like your computer. You don't ask your computer what to eat for breakfast. It just doesn't make sense. And a lot of times we're really asking a question and the brain should just buffer. It should just sit there with that little buffer sign until we decide, okay, the brain doesn't know, back to you, Jill, right? But the brain doesn't buffer. The brain's like, well, you asked me a question. I don't know the answer, but I'll give you one because it's always obliging. The brain will always give you an answer. And it's really making it up. What should I do with my life? You don't ask your computer what you should do with your life.
I feel like that's why I'm so happy we're doing this entire series and this podcast. All of these episodes are to help us reorient and reinterpret what our brain is relative to what we are. And we are the operators of our brain. We are so much more than our brain. So those big questions, what is God? Why am I here? What am I? We can ask the brain. And if the brain isn't connected to an inspired answer that's from beyond it, i.e. what I call spirit, right, then it's going to be a limited answer. Related directly to transition, Jill, the support system. Some individuals really, really could benefit from a support system. And I would love to encourage people to be very thoughtful with their brain's thoughts about whom they are talking with about the transition, because there are definitely going to be, whether it's somebody you know personally or just inspirers within you, whether it's a thought leader, you get their newsletter, or you listen to their podcast, or you read their books, or whatever. There's going to be a support system that will help you believe in yourself and believe in, I can get through this, and it's going to be okay, or it's going to be great. And there's definitely going to be, I want to say, an anti-support system. We probably all know somebody that isn't the best at being there for us in an encouraging, compassionate, graceful way. Even my favorite people in my life, when we were talking earlier about the transition and cycles of getting the excitable big idea, Jill, I don't want, when I'm in that space, they're my favorite people in life. Sometimes the people I'm closest to, there are some of them I don't go to when I'm in that phase, because their gift is not, oh my God, that sounds so exciting. Now, what about this part and what about that part? In a staying engaged and elevated kind of way. They're better at the, okay, now let me tell you how that's not going to work. Right? And those people have a huge value add to us. But I just encourage people to be really self-loving in who and what your support system is, depending on what kind of phase of the transition you're in, and really trust your heart in what you need to hear. And there's probably going to be somebody that you know exactly is going to be that person for you. Jill, I know from our conversations and being your friend that there are some people that know exactly, like I know exactly to call Jill Lankler right now.
Yes,
Right?
I'm an acquired taste for sure.
You're consistently real and loving, and I want to say tough. Yeah. It's in a not a tough love kind of way, just no, I know you're going to get through this. I mean, you are unshakable, and I love that about you. I've been called people's favorite cheerleader, when they're like, okay, I'm kind of thinking about this, like whether it's, I'm kind of thinking about leaving my significant other. And I'm like, oh, let's talk about it. What's making you think that way? And once they're, in a deciding mode and they're decided, I'm like, okay, you got this.
And I agree. And I go to you for that all the time, Jill, like that is the beauty, I think, it's just, you do, for me, just give this very non-judgmental, but it's a grounded support, right? And I think that's the difference. When you're going to a support system, number one, you know what your parents are going to say, you know what people are going to say, you know where they're coming from, whether it's their own stuff that they're projecting onto you because they're afraid of change, right? But I think that the people you want to go to need to be grounded in themselves so that you can get information that's just related to you. You don't want to start mixing messy stories here, and trying to weed through other people's nonsense, right? So if I'm coming to you, Jill, I really just get this sense that there's a groundedness there and that what you're talking to is specifically for me, right? And that, I will say, it can be rare. So be discerning, and just because people are offering you something in love, that concern is people's way of loving too, and it doesn't move the dial a lot of times is what I'll say. So you don't need other people's concern. Everybody who's in a crisis knows that they don't want to be looked at as like the broken wheel. They do want people who are there to support them without reservation. Yeah. And I think that that's a really important quality when you're looking for support.
I love that. It is really an important quality. This opportunity that we have to write our own story, leading directly from what you were talking about earlier is so important, that the brain can be really fixated on, well, if, again, using the example of divorce, well, I know all these other people that got divorced and it went badly this way, and oh my God, I'm going to be a single parent or whatever. So watch if your brain is, again, in the stickiness of how bad it's going to be, because I hope if that is resonating with someone, that you're looking for a different kind of support, that you're not going to call those divorcees and be like, okay, I'm in the camp with you guys now. Really reach out to somebody, or at least be open to somebody being encouraging and supportive and positive, like you're going to get through this. And because your outcome amidst this transition could be the best anyone's ever seen, ever heard of, and ever knew was possible. And that rosier, like, oh my God, this was crazy, I made it work great, is dependent on you.
Yes. Yeah. And look, there can be two exact same situations. One can be glass half full, one can be glass half empty. The brain will, just like your day goes in the direction of your smile, your brain goes in the direction of what you're looking for. If you're looking for doomsday, your brain will find evidence of doomsday. So just beware where you direct your brain to start looking for things. That's an awareness that's super, super important. It will find evidence for the positive. It will find evidence for the negative, because please understand, it all exists in, I'm going to say, equal amounts. But if your brain is only looking for one, you're going to have a really skewed sense of the data out there. And a lot of media, anything you read, statistics, they're all sensationalized, and they're all purpose driven. Nobody's writing an article for no reason. They are trying to drive an agenda. So be skeptical, please be skeptical. In fact, I wouldn't look for data. I think it's a black hole. You don't need data to, I don't think you need data to operate on whether, your divorce situation is going to go well, or whether your new job is going to go well. It's apples and oranges. Like, well, when other people, you'll find articles when other people move to their second jobs, data shows that they were inherently unhappy. What kind of amorphous, bogus nonsense is that? But there is a lot of that stuff out there, which is, anyway, I digress.
But no, it's not a digression, because the brain is, again, trying to find certainty. And if it's looking in the wrong places, it can create your story in a suppressive way. And that's not helpful. Joe, what do you think about this? I said, please edit this part out, Jill. I'm trying to get to a great question for you, because I want to hear your input on this. What about people that have this inner voice that feels a lot like maybe a negative parent, or somebody that was very limiting of what's possible? What do you recommend for people that have a negative voice in their head that might be their parents or some other authority figure, and it's almost like they can't, that's all they hear?
Yeah, I like that. Look, who doesn't have some sort of a negative figure talking in there, right? I do. And a lot of times we just have made that our own, right? When our parents stop yelling at us, we say the exact same things to ourselves that our parents had. And I think what I like to do, and it goes back to the truth thing, I like to ask if these things are true. Because if somebody says, well, you're really not very outgoing, or you're really not good with bosses, or you really don't make friends well. If somebody has something that they're kind of saying to you to keep you small, you can look at where they've gotten and decide whether you admire that, right? So we talked about the feedback situation in another episode. But I also started asking myself, where did this idea come from? Whose idea is it? Where did I learn this? Because it's learned. It's not you. It's an idea that somebody gave you about you. So there is what I call a need to dissociate from the beliefs that you've inherited about yourself. And then transition is the perfect place to start to question all of them. Because as you said earlier, you're now creating a new you. And please understand, this isn't a new identity. This is bringing more, in my version, bringing more of you online. It's opening up more aspects of you. And in doing so, you're creating a version that hasn't existed before. All right. So to me, I want to know, do I want to bring this thought into this open space of transition where anything can go and carry it forward? That's brain training. And this is transition training. Transition is all the baggage stays back there. You decide what baggage you bring to this next iteration of you. But if you don't leave the baggage behind, what was will be a good indicator of what will be. It's not always the case. We have this terrible thing here where if you want to know where you're going, look where you've been. Oh my God. Oh my God. I can't. In every moment, we can decide, yes, I've been there. That's in the past. That's in the past. And my interpretation when I was 8 years old of those events has no relevance to me right now. It really doesn't. And we don't let ourselves kind of grow. So in answer to your question, it was a big, long-winded answer. I hope people can really appreciate the different parts of it. It's not a neat ball, but don't bring what was into the transition space. Transition is a cleanse. It's basically a cleanse. It's a brain cleanse.
Thank you so much.
I edit that part out too.
No, I like it. Thank you. Thank you so much for adding that, because those inner voices, those inner thoughts they're really important here. I know for myself, there's a very, I'm going to use the word negative, but valuable voice that we can have within us. So I'm looking for, is this valuable or not?
Yeah.
The part that says, and thankfully I don't have this, but I know some people do just have this really, really ugly voice available to within themselves. And oh my God, just big hugs to everybody. Anybody that has that. But sometimes I know I'm also asking, in addition to your kind of questions for that inner voice that maybe is more self-sabotaging, does that voice sound like anyone to you? Right. And sometimes if it is a parent that they did not bond with, that they did not have a positive connection with, it's very revealing to go, oh my God, that's my mom. Some people will say that. And it identifies literally that tone in a very real way so that they can regularly kind of go, oh yeah, because what I like to then add is, you're not your mom. You're not your dad. Even those of us that love our parents, I am not my mom and I am not my dad. I am Jill, and I've made this Jill in addition to the genetic material and the experiences that I had and was offered by my parents. But that authorship amidst transition, I just feel is so important and so golden, is looking for yourself, your originality. What do you hope and what do you want to happen? And what can you do in yourself to try to make this as positive as possible or as great as possible?
Yeah, I really like that. Look, I think we've said it, in maybe in a non-linear way, but I think we got all the pieces here. Transition should always be seen as opportunity. And seeing it any other way just does a huge disservice to you, because you just waste time. You eventually get there, But how long it takes is dependent on what your vantage point is of transition. And it's that old thing, if everything works out in the end, if it's still not working out, it's not the end, right? So I would offer that's, if things aren't working out, you're just still in transition. And people say, well, this is the way it is. And they kind of lock in a space in transition that's not where you want to lock in. And you end up sort of stuck in this negative space, not realizing that that was just a transitional space. And then now you've made it a permanent space by not treating it as transient.
Yeah. I do feel like we're wrapping up here. I want to point out another episode that we did, and that was the downside of self-help. And the reason I bring this up is that for some individuals, tickle. For some individuals, it is amidst big transitions in their life where they end up falling, I'm going to say, prey to really downward spiraling self-help areas. So if you're in transition and you are looking outside yourself for answers and you're hearing things such as, well, everything happens for a reason, or just stay positive. I really, really want to guide people to that self-help episode because it is such a, eye-opening, oh my God, truth-telling wisdom session on not losing yourself amidst transition to some other really tantalizing fantasy-based ideas that can sound great to a part of you that is terrified of transition and not sure how you're going to get through it. Please don't look to guru, oh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to you. Fantasy sounding ideas that when we are vulnerable in transition, we are the most susceptible to.
That is so perfectly said. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because the goal of transition, I would say, is to restore your authority, to restore your autonomy from the places where you have given it away. And if you don't recognize that that is the goal of transition and how this is for you, then your brain will take that non-autonomous self that just got plunged into transition, and it will try to find someplace else to give your authority away. Meaning it will stay in a pre-transition state of not feeling agency in your life, because not feeling agency is always what propels a transition, whether you like it or not. That's kind of what happens there. So people, when they choose transition, they're choosing to take agency in their life. That's the choice point. If they're forced into transition, it's still them. Okay, I got here. Now I have to do something. But beware the brain's 1-2 punch where it says, now you need somewhere else to be reliant. You need somewhere else where you don't have to be. You don't have to reclaim your authority. I hope did I say that well? I don't know, Jill, if that makes sense.
I feel like I guess if I were to reword what I thought you said, is in the midst of transition, we can unknowingly be wanting to look for a new authority figure, not trusting ourselves.
Correct.
Did I say that correctly?
That's what I'm trying to say.
That self-help episode is absolutely great, you guys, because some people may in this transition, listening to this episode, feel like, we're covering some very basic types of things, but notice everything we've been talking about has been redirecting you to yourself and your own sense of authority, your own creator energy, and what you have available to you, even amidst a terrifying transition and even amidst a great opportunity type of transition. So you being in charge of you is what we are supporting, and with a brain that is supporting your best self and not self-sabotaging. So I feel like this is a really important episode. It may not be as fantasy-based, which sometimes we want, and I think that's for all the right reasons. I would encourage somebody that is in transition to take notes, listen to it or watch it again and take notes on what stands out the most for you in terms of, yes, this I need/want to pay attention to. I want to watch out for this in myself. And if you know someone that's in transition, maybe you want to add your notes on what you think is most helpful about this episode to them. Sometimes in transition, we're not making time to sit through although we should, a 50-minute kind of loving Auntie Jill to Auntie Jill kind
Auntie Jill's.
Auntie Jill's kind of, let's be real here. Let's be here for you in a very grounded, rational, and I hope inspired way.
Yeah. I love it. It's a wrap.
And hugs to everyone going through transition. There's a lot of us. And I hope it's
technically useful. It's all of us.
It's all of us. Yes. It's just that the brain says, wait, this is transition.
Right. Yes.
All right. Hugs to everybody. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.